Good evening, and thank you for attending tonight's meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education. The agenda will be displayed on the screens in the front of the room. You may also follow along by connecting to the district's website at www.wcsoh.org. Click on our district link, then select Board of Education, and then Board Docs Agenda, and select the evening's meeting. There will be two opportunities to address the board this evening, the first being Agenda Item 6.01. The first set of public comments is relative to Agenda Items 7.01 through 12.02. Please state the agenda items you are referencing at the beginning of your comments. The second opportunity is Agenda Item 13.01. There is a sign-up sheet located on the table in the back of the room. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to address the board. And with that, Mr. Griffith, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Cotter?
Here.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Here.
Mrs. Davidson?
Here.
Mr. Velardo?
Here.
Thank you. I would like to invite everyone to stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to ask for a motion to nominate someone for the office of president.
I would like to turn my mic on first, and then I would like to make a motion to nominate Rick Velardo as president of 2018 year.
And
17. I'm at 18.
Sorry,
I'm ahead.
and I'll second that for 2017. Russian hack, yes.
Can I, Bart, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Abstain.
Mrs. Cotter?
Yes.
Okay. The nameplates. No, it's okay. Procedural technicality.
Thank you very much for that thunderous applause. I would like to ask for nominations for office of Vice President for Board of Education for 2017.
I'd like to nominate Dr. Nancy Nestor Baker.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other nominations? We close nominations, correct?
Yes, that's fine. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Griffith, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Cotter?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes. We have nominated and elected officers for this year, and I know that both of us are excited and honored to serve in this capacity. Thank you. We are up to agenda item 4.01, public comments pertaining to action items. Reminder, you have 5 minutes to address the board in the public comments section of the agenda. Please remember to address the agenda items you are referencing at the beginning of your comments. A timer will be shown on the screens. Mr. Hershiser will call time when 5 minutes has elapsed. Please address your comments to the board and not to the audience. I went through that rather quickly because we have no one signed up for public comments. Going on to financials, agenda item 5.01, resolution to approve requests from the treasurer. Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Bart, do you have anything to share with us about this particular agenda item?
I would, Mr. President, members of the board. This is an annual a motion that you guys, the board, give me permission to do during the year. And just to go through there and just briefly state what some of those are, or all of those. One of those, you give me me and my office purchase necessary services and materials and make payments of all bills, salaries when due, within the limits of the appropriations, to do any transfer outstanding stale dated checks to the general fund, execute all contracts in a normal course of the business within appropriated amounts, advance funds from the general fund to other funds as needed, to invest interim inactive funds at the most productive interest rates as they become available, sign all payroll checks, all general account checks, purchase orders, all contracts, mechanical facsimile signatures, request amended certificates of estimated resources from the Franklin, Delaware County auditors, and request and execute on behalf of the Board of Education the advance of all taxes and funds as they may be available. There's also a tax abatement notification. We submit a letter to the county auditors telling them if there's a tax abatement, who to send those information to our attorney. Then the reading of the minutes, we also dispense the reading of the minutes. You guys basically just go over those, make sure that there's any adjustments. So those are what you've given me the approval to do for this next calendar year.
Awesome, thank you very much. Any questions, concerns, discussion about that? If not, Mr. Griffith, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Ms. Cotter,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes. Resolution to, agenda item 5.02, resolution to participate in state and federal funded programs in fiscal year 2017. Bart, I think you're going to discuss this a little bit as well.
I am.
Let me have a motion and a second, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, members of the board, Mr. President, members of the board, these are, I can get my notes back here where you guys, this is to approve resolution to participate in state and federal grants. We deal with a lot of state and federal grants. You'll see on my financials that we have anywhere from 400 funds, which are state, and 500 funds, which are federal. We have numerous, we have auxiliary services, we have alternative school funds, we have refugee children funds, Title I funds, preschool funds, an assortment of state and federal funds. And I've given you the fund numbers that we have permission to approve. Sometimes during the year, you'll see me come back and ask to change some of these because we either had one added or deleted. But for the going forward for this calendar year, we currently have 13 funds identified that we would be using in our financials.
Okay.
So this just gives us approval to work with those funds.
And is this just kind of an ongoing, every year approval because they are, they're not always consistent, they change periodically? We just need to approve them every year?
They do
Approve the
change.
participation in them every
They
year?
do. The majority of them are the same, but you have some additional ones that come on and off.
Right, like the National School Lunch Program would be obviously an ongoing
Yes.
entity, right?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Okay, Bart, please call the roll.
Ms. Cotter,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes. Agenda item 5.03, resolution to approve Board of Education participation. Bart, I think you're going through this again as well?
I am. But when,
I know, I just wanted to make sure that you were the one we were going to call.
yes.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Mr. President, members of the board, this is a resolution. We deal, prior to 2012, when we did all the cuts, we probably worked with a lot of other groups. But currently, since that date and even today, we work basically with the Ohio School Boards Association Legal Assistance Fund. The yearly cost for that is $250 a year. The Westerville Chamber of Commerce, last year was roughly $805. That may be close to this year. And the Ohio School Boards Association, it's around $7,600 a year. So I know I have the amounts in here. I don't have those on my sheet. But those are the three groups that we work with, and this just is approval to continue to work with those three groups.
Yep, good. Thank you. Any questions? Discussion? Okay, Bart, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Cotter,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes. Agenda item 6, recommended action, old business. These are just just a quick introduction. These are group health plans. This is pertaining to our health policies and plans, and these are grouped. Bart, if I'm remembering correctly, and well, I'll get to the motion, et cetera, but there are 3, 3, 3, 3. They're all very similar, but they are focused on different groups within our organization, right?
Correct.
Okay, so before we do all that, we're going to talk about them individually, but unless there's an objection, I'd like to take these as a whole with one motion. Any objection to that? Okay, so for Section 6, recommended action old business, can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
Thank you. Bart, would you just talk us through these as a group, and then maybe group them together in their I want to say the word trinity, but I'll get some pushback from that, in their the threes together. Does that make sense? You understand what I'm asking?
Yes.
I want people to understand that although 601, 602, 603 essentially say exactly the same thing, they are applying to different groups within our organization, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Bart. I'll be quiet and let you speak a little bit.
Okay, the ones that are titled, you'll see three sets of numbers. There's a 161901, a 3419, and a 4419. Those have to do with our self-funded group health plans, which are currently the dental and the medical program. This district is self-funded. This basically gives us the permission to use those self-funded funds and plans. It gets the guidance for those plans. And so when we see the different groups, there's a 1619, 3419, and 4419. Those are different groups. I think it's classified, certified, and administrative. Those are the three groups. And so all these plans, when you see there's three numbers and there's three groups, we have some going through here, I guess to start at the top. If I'll jump to 6.04, it's privacy protections for self-funded groups, where it says the privacy officials shall develop, propose to the board and implement policies and procedures for the group health plans relating to the use and disclosure of protected health information, which is HIPAA. That's 161901, 341901, and 4419. If I jump to 6.07, which is 161902, these are the privacy protections for the fully funded group. The only fully funded group we have is the vision. Mm-hmm. And so this is, again, gives us information that we need to basically develop plans to keep the HIPAA rules safe and the privacy of anybody that's on those plans, and the policies for our office to make sure we implement those correctly. So that's for that group. Then we go to the 341902, 441902 is, this is the other two. We go to 161903, 341903, and 441903 is the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, where we're supposed to notify new employees of health insurance options through the health insurance marketplace, which is currently the Obamacare part of that, where you can go to the marketplace if you don't want our insurance here. Those are the three that we basically have to notify those three groups that there is another option for them other than ours.
Right.
That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. It's never the policy of this Board of Education to just fly through things and not be explanatory. But when they're so similar, we want to group them together so that people can understand, well, this one applies to admin and this one applies to classified. So it was just very helpful as I was reading through them, and really we read through all these policies, I assure you. They were just exactly the same thing, but applying to different groupings in the number-based system. So that being said, any questions, any discussion on any of those? No? Okay, Bart, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Cotter,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes. And really, Bart, thank you for going through that, and I hope that was helpful for people as they listen to this later on. Item 7, recommended action, standing business, 7.01, to appoint the board designee as public records official. Now, it's my understanding that Mr. Griffith and Mr. Hershiser would both like this, and we have to decide.
It's hilarious.
Don't worry, you'll win. You'll win.
But we're all pulling for Mr. Griffith, so I'm sorry to say that. We're just being silly here. Let me have a motion and a second before we discuss this. Thank you.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Bart, I don't want to turn this always over to you, but do you want to explain what this is all about so people understand the job that you are taking on?
Yes. What we've done, and every public official in Ohio has to have this process, is the state of Ohio has elected to choose that no matter who the person is, they have the right to any public information in the school district or in the chamber, or not chamber, any, like the city, county governments, federal governments. In Ohio, they've said, we don't care if you live out of state. You apply to us for our records, we'll give you the records. So any records that somebody wants to see about this district should be filed to the treasurer's office or with my attention. The law says you don't have to give your name. You can do it anonymously. You don't have to tell me, but you just have to at least tell me where I can send the information. But as the records official, any public document that leaves this district through a public records request should come through my office. In other words, if you're a parent and you're asking kid's name, that doesn't qualify. It's a public record of a public official, and it always pertains to the duties of that office. So sometimes people say, well, what if I want to see what they had for lunch? Well, that doesn't document what they do in the workplace. And so that's not a record. If somebody says they traded a recipe, it doesn't document what the employee was doing. So if you ask for a record that documents what the public employee is doing in their position and their capacity as a school, in our case, as a school district employee, we are obliged to give you that record. There are some records that have to be redacted, whether it's personal identifying information, social security information. So, and if we redact the information, we're supposed to tell the person requesting that what we've redacted and why. We just can't redact it and say, here you go. So there's things that we have to comply with to make the document imaging. Sometimes we say it's 5 cents a record. But if I have to make a copy of it, because they can't redact a record and give it to you, you just have to hold it up and you can see what it is. So if you're asking me for a document that I have to redact, it's 10 cents a page because I have to make 2 copies for you to have that information. So that's why sometimes you'll see 5 cents or 10 cents. If somebody wants it on a CD, if that's what the media is on. Again, it's more public records. I'm supposed to give you the record that it's in. And I don't have to create a record for you. If you want me to calculate numbers for you, that's not me. Our job is to give you a record if it exists in the form that it exists. Okay. So as a records official, the records come to me in my office. I will usually call somebody else that they may pertain to, HR. Greg V. Branch helps me with those records a lot too. I'll have Greg, and he manages a lot of that as well. So any record that's a public document that documents the work that this district does is subject to anybody who wants a copy of it. And so kind of a long-winded way around it, but it's important people understand what is a record.
Yeah, no, it's very helpful, and I made a comment, teasing about the two of you, but we don't want to minimize that we live in a society that honors open records requests, and that's good.
We try to make sure that we have to provide it in a reasonable time frame. If you ask me for a document that may take me a week to compile it and you want the next day, we'll tell you that's not reasonable. We try to make sure that it's a reasonable time frame.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Questions? Okay, Bart, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes, thank you. 7.02, resolution to establish the 2017 Board of Education meeting calendar. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. You see the calendar here on our screen, and certainly it will be on website, et cetera. Is there any discussion?
I would like to propose a board retreat sooner versus the summer. Just new president, new vice president. We haven't had one in a while, so that's what I'm proposing. Maybe we could submit a couple ideas, what we would like to talk about
Okay.
to you, Any thoughts from anyone else?
I'm fine with that. I think it's a good idea. I get really disappointed in retreats that are nothing but dog and pony shows. I like them to be discussion more about what-ifing and how-abouting other than PowerPoints. So I'm in favor of doing that actually at both times, because, the early session is one way to spend some time together talking and figuring out things. The later sessions that is proposed, that gives us an opportunity to really dig into some pieces of work that'll be going forward through the year. I do want to point out the usual caveat that these are subject to change.
Yep.
And still would require discussion amongst us, particularly around retreat dates and times and how that might play out.
Absolutely.
I'd be interested in having an extra retreat also. I think that's a really good idea to kind of get things started off a little bit more quickly. So,
Good, I'm all in favor of that, and we're doing this a little bit informally, but I would be glad to receive some options of dates earlier, and just see if we can discuss that a little bit. Any questions, any thoughts on that?
Just a couple. Not a problem at all. Administration will happy to do that. One of the concepts we talked about in board leadership regarding a retreat towards the end of the school year was to use that as a time to process the feedback from the community engagement process this spring that we're working on. So that would provide some data and information for us for some decisions moving forward. That was one framework for the so I'm just planting ideas. In terms of other formats for a retreat, I'd ask that perhaps if we're going to do that, can we position what we want to, kind of goals of the retreat, not just dates, but goals, what do we want to talk about, what do we want to focus on? Administration, is in the process of developing a long-range staffing plan. We're going to do the community engagement piece. We have the quality profile. We'll have new state budget, probably the last day of June at midnight. That'll affect our 5-year forecast. What's the state cap going to be? Projections along those. So there are a couple variables in there to consider as we go down that path. I just, in order to make it meaningful for the board, I think it would be helpful to frame what it is you want to go after and what you want to look at. But perhaps through your comments to Rick and then through board leadership, we can sit down and start to frame those out. But I would be in favor of something. One concept in terms of a time frame I'd suggest is, I know work days are hard, but we talked internally, and the administrative team is on board with doing something like a Friday evening, half of it on a Friday evening, half of it on a Saturday morning, if we want to do something like that, or an all-day Saturday. So we're ready to do that with our calendars to make it worthwhile as well. So glad to put together whatever you like to focus on.
Good. And I like the idea of coming with some ideas, some agenda items as well as some dates, and I know that you all are in favor of that as well. So maybe push some ideas, et cetera, this way, and then in board leadership, we can kind of hone those down and then make some decisions. And I think, Nancy, you're right that we're trying to lock into these dates, but obviously it may need to stay fluid for whatever reasons.
Sure.
Good, really, good.
Thank you.
The other option, I just thought if I was sitting here, would be to chunk it and pick some big topics like staffing, and we just spend some time on that one, rather than trying to do too much and feel scrunched. So what are the big items moving forward? And as I project forward, the community engagement piece, relationship to educational programs and facilities is going to be big. Staffing and its relationship to the 5-year forecast programs, I think, is big. Those are, in my head, as I look forward, and then we're not in control of, but the state funding model, absent Representative Brenner's proposal, which I'm not sure that has wings, is another one. So I think those are some of the big area topics for us. We annually look at our enrollment. We had that discussion about our enrollment. We're looking at going ahead and redoing the district enrollment projections There's a cost to that of $5,000. We're going to use that as a precursor to whether or not we think there's such changes that warrant digging down deeper and spending more money on enrollment projections at the building level, something we haven't traditionally done, but we could do. So enrollment projections tied closely to funding from the state, because you're funded on a per pupil amount, and you have add-ons for things like socioeconomic, economically disadvantaged, CTE, career technical education, ESL, special ed classification. All of those variables add to the state funding model too. So there's lots of little pieces that it might be worthwhile, rather than trying to do, as I'm thinking off the top of my head, one major retreat. Maybe you want to chunk it into a couple things and think about the relationship between those, the alignment of those.
I think that's a good idea, and as we send some thoughts, toward Rick, it will become clearer to us whether that works. I actually prefer that, and I think it's easier on people's families oftentimes to chunk it rather than to, blitz through marathon retreat stuff and everybody stumbles out with their eyes glazed at the end of it. So I would be in favor of looking at whether that makes sense. Also, I'm in favor of those larger pieces. For me, a retreat isn't about reports that could and should be done within a regular meeting focus. It's much more about identifying strands, synthesis, issues, connections, those pieces that shape and drive what we all do here, the administration and the board together. So, as I think about what I'll be sending forward, I will be thinking about the ideas that you just put out there, because those are biggies, and thinking about them also within the structure of who is in the retreat and why, and what is it we need to do to become better at what we do as a board, as an administration, as a district.
That's exactly what I was thinking. So I was thinking something informal. So 3 years ago, we started what I know now versus what I knew then. I would love to be able to talk to all 5 of you about, this is where we started, this is where, we think we want to go, hopefully, with input of, the direction of what the community wants. But something informal. I really wanted to just have a discussion. I mean, I was, not a long retreat, an hour or two, and really talk, to be able to talk to each other. I don't know.
So ideas to you.
Yeah, just send, listen, I'm all for it. My world does retreats, and I'm in favor of them on a number of levels. Sometimes they can be just very meaningful, having just good, authentic discussions and the bouncing of ideas. And sometimes I've done retreats where it's been like this major topic you have got to get into. And if you do something like that, then you can go to staff and say, it's going to be all about this. So we need these people in the room, and we need this kind of information. And then, so I'm very excited about that. Love the idea. Want to get sooner rather than later. Would love to do that. And the later one, or it sounds more mid-year one, really is a reflection of, or a reflecting on, the community engagement, community involvement piece that we're trying to get out the door.
Well, as I've shared before, our intent to the directive from the last meeting about a community engagement piece is to bring to the board a framework for what we think that might look like at the second meeting of February. I think we said first or second. I think it's the second meeting in February. Might be the first. Anyway, I'll go back and look. And so whether or not that warrants, I won't use the word retreat, but warrants a work session, an extended period of time to talk about the engagement process, who's doing it, how we're doing it, where we're doing it, what are the goals of it. That might be a kickoff, planting a seed towards, okay, we're going to do a work session, spend an hour, block out an hour of time for, as Ms. Davidson said, that kind of informal chat around, do we think this is going to get us where we want, is going to answer these questions? Do we like the format? Do we want to make sure, all those pieces are in place? And who we're going to partner with if we're using a third party to do that, as we've talked about, and we're starting to vet that. So that could be a starting point.
I like that a lot.
Good discussion. Thank you all. Thank you for bringing that up. What's that?
The spring is now planned. Well, that takes us to June.
That's pretty much it, isn't it? Okay. Any other discussion regarding this proposed calendar? No? Okay. Bart, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Cotter,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes. And I think I read the public comment section earlier, one section earlier, didn't I? Public comment section, remind you will have 5 minutes to address the board of public comment section of the agenda. Please remember to address the agenda items that you're referencing at the beginning of your comments. Time will be shown on the screen, and Mr. Hershiser will call time when 5 minutes have elapsed. Please address your comments to the board and not to the audience. I skimmed through it again because we have no one signed up for public comments at this time. And go to agenda item 9.01, board comments. Who would like to share deeply and powerfully?
Well, I'm out.
Okay. Or superficially and cursory.
Okay, there.
Want me to go?
Sure.
Just want to say congratulations to President Velardo and Vice President Dr. Nestor Baker. We're excited about this year. Let's do big things. Okay.
Yes, I'd like to echo my congratulations. I'm looking forward to this year, so.
I'm delighted, and I thank you for allowing me to take part in the leadership team. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to working with Rick, and of course to continuing the work that we're doing together. I'm viewing this as, at this point in time, I'm viewing this as a strength-building year as we strengthen the community involvement component, both through the community engagement work that John was just talking about, and also day-to-day functioning within our buildings, within what we do within this district together. I'm also looking at it as a strength-building year as we take a look at where we've come with our strategic plan and how we will build on that in the future years, and that is part of our community involvement piece. I'm looking at it as strength-building from the perspective of the board's functions in and of itself. We have come a long way in many ways over the years that we've worked together, and as we have each come onto the board, we've brought different strengths and different desires, and we have worked really hard to make a good team out of that, and I see us in a good position to continue to move that forward. And I also see it as a strength-building year as regards our ability to advocate for this district. The changes that John mentioned earlier, the changes that are coming, the changes that are currently being implemented, the changes that we are still working to address, predominantly from the state level, but also from the federal level as well, require us to continually up our efforts to speak up for this district and what this district needs, what our children need, what our educators need, what all of our staff needs, what every community member needs. And I'd also like to see us continue to work with our staff as we build strength in our academic program. So many good things have happened, as we were talking about just what happened during the last calendar year. As I think about what's happened just over the past few years, so much has happened. It's almost easy to forget how much good has gone on. And I'm seeing this year as an opportunity to continue to say, hey, remember what we have done and how far we've come and what we've all done together, but also then to say, now what? Where's this going and how's that move on? Which ties right into those chunks of retreats. So that's what I'm looking forward to. It's, at this point in time, it looks like it's going to be a good year.
Was that a caveat?
A caveat, you never know what's going to happen.
Thank you. I am humbled and honored to serve. I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and not wanting to get ahead of myself, I'm going to bring just a couple of thoughts about some hopes and goals that I have at our next meeting. I just want to share a few brief thoughts, but I didn't want to make any assumptions, so I don't have any of that to share today. Very excited, very honored, and I serve with some really good people up at these tables. and I'm honored to continue to do that. Agenda item 10.01 per approval of 802, the Board of Education meet in regular session Monday, January 23rd, 2017, 6 p.m. here in the Early Learning Center. May I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Bart, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Cotter,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes, we are adjourned.